I thought Marcus was the one. For 3 years, he dated the girl who tutored kids after school for extra cash, shopped at discount stores, and never ordered anything expensive when we went out. He'd always comment on how down-to-earth I was compared to the privileged princesses at his law firm. "You're so genuine, Emma," he'd say, watching me clip coupons at the kitchen table of my modest one-bedroom apartment. "Not like these trust fund babies who've never faced a real struggle in their entire lives." I'd smile and agree, playing my role perfectly while folding the coupons into my worn wallet. What Marcus didn't know was that my family founded and owned Williams Renewable Energy Corporation, the largest clean energy conglomerate on the West Coast. The tutoring job wasn't something I needed for money. It was something I genuinely loved, working with kids who reminded me why education mattered. The budget shopping and coupon clipping wasn't out of necessity. It was a deliberate choice to see who would value me for my character and heart, not the size of my trust fund or my family's political connections. I'd been burned badly before. In college, my ex-boyfriend Jake had seemed perfect until I made the mistake of trusting him with the truth about my family's wealth. Within a week of our breakup, he'd posted screenshots of our private conversations about money on social media, along with photos he'd secretly taken of family documents at my apartment. Suddenly, I had dozens of new friends trying to get close to me, guys sliding into my DMs with investment opportunities and date requests, and people who'd never spoken to me before acting like we were best friends. The experience taught me that money corrupts nearly everything it touches, especially relationships, so I decided to keep my family's wealth completely hidden from everyone in my adult life. My younger sister Rachel knew the truth, of course. She'd watched me navigate the complicated dynamics of extreme wealth since we were kids, seen how it changed people's behavior toward us, witnessed the fake friendships and the users who tried to get close to our family. She understood why I'd chosen to live modestly and work a regular job. She helped me maintain the careful facade I'd constructed, covering for me when important family board meetings conflicted with my tutoring schedule, making excuses when I couldn't attend events because I was supposedly working extra shifts for money. Or so I believed. She was helping me. 3 weeks ago, I came home early from a renewable energy conference in San Francisco, where I'd been representing our family's interests as a silent board member. I was planning to surprise Marcus before his bar exam results came out. He'd been so nervous about whether he'd passed, and I wanted to be there for him during what I knew would be either a celebration or a difficult moment. Instead of finding him studying or anxiously checking his email, I found him and Rachel in our bedroom, half-dressed and clearly not engaged in any kind of innocent conversation. "This isn't what you think," Marcus stammered, scrambling to pull on his shirt while Rachel sat there on my bed, calmly adjusting her dress like this was the most natural thing in the world. Rachel didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed or ashamed. She just sat there with this cold, calculating expression, like she'd been caught in a business negotiation rather than betraying her own sister. "Actually, it's exactly what you think," she said in that cool, controlled voice she used when she was trying to manipulate a situation to her advantage. "Marcus and I have been seeing each other for 2 months now. We were planning to tell you after his results came in, once he knew whether he'd passed the bar." My hands trembled as I dropped my conference bag and suitcase by the door. 2 months. They'd been carrying on this affair for 2 entire months, meeting behind my back, planning their future while I was completely oblivious. 2 months? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus had the decency to look ashamed, at least. His face was flushed and he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Look, Emma, what we had together was special. It really was. But Rachel and I, we connect on a different level. She has real ambition, genuine potential. She understands what I need to build the kind of successful career I've always dreamed of having." I almost laughed out loud at the irony. Potential? Ambition? If he only knew what he was saying and to whom. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this," Rachel said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. If anything, she sounded relieved that the secret was finally out in the open. "But honestly, Emma, Marcus needs someone who can help him build the career he deserves. Someone with the right connections, the right understanding of how success really works in the legal world." I nodded slowly, my mind racing through the implications of what I was hearing. They thought I was just some ordinary girl with a tutoring job and a small apartment. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. "You're absolutely right," I said, managing to keep my voice steady. "He does deserve someone who can give him everything he wants and needs." They exchanged a quick glance, probably relieved that I seemed to be taking this revelation so calmly, without the drama and tears they'd probably been expecting. "I hope you'll both be very happy together," I said, turning toward the door like I was preparing to leave quietly and let them get on with their new life. "Marcus, congratulations on passing the bar exam, by the way. I'm sure Williams & Associates will be absolutely thrilled to have you join their team." "Thanks," he said, confusion flickering across his face as he processed what I just said. Wait a minute. How did you know I passed? I haven't even gotten the results yet myself. I paused in the doorway, turning back to face them both. Oh, didn't Rachel tell you? Our father is Jonathan Williams, the senior founding partner of the firm. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Marcus went completely pale, all the blood draining from his face like he'd just seen a ghost. Rachel looked like she might actually pass out from shock. That's impossible, Marcus said slowly, his voice barely a whisper. Your dad is some kind of consultant or something. You told me he worked in business consulting. Actually, he's Jonathan Williams, senior founding partner of Williams & Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms on the West Coast. You know, the firm you've been desperately trying to get an interview with since your second year of law school. The firm you've called every week for the past 6 months, leaving messages with the receptionist, hoping someone would give you a chance. Marcus sank into the chair by our bedroom window, the same chair where he'd studied for the bar exam for months, where I'd brought him coffee and encouraged him during his most stressful moments. But you work as a tutor. You live in this tiny apartment. You drive that 15-year-old Honda with the dented bumper. I choose to live simply, Marcus. There's a significant difference between can't afford something and don't need to flaunt wealth to feel good about yourself. Rachel finally found her voice, though it sounded shaky and uncertain. You're lying. I would have known something. I'm your sister. I would have figured it out. Would you, Rachel? The same way I would have known that you were sleeping with my fiancé in my own bed for 2 months? The same way I would have known that you were planning this whole betrayal while pretending to support my relationship? I pulled out my phone and showed them my contact list, scrolling to the entry marked Dad's office. Marcus had been calling that exact same number for weeks, trying desperately to get an interview, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails with our family's secretary. The same number he'd practiced his elevator pitch for, the same number that represented everything he thought he wanted in his professional life. This is completely insane, Marcus whispered, staring at my phone screen like it might somehow change what he was seeing. Why didn't you tell me who you really were? Why would you keep something this important secret for 3 entire years? Because I wanted someone to love me for who I am as a person, not what my family's money and connections could do for their career ambitions. Clearly, that was never actually you. Marcus jumped up from the chair suddenly, almost knocking it over in his haste. Wait, Emma, please. We can work this out. We can fix this. Rachel was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. She doesn't mean anything real to me. Hey, Rachel protested, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. You're absolutely right about one thing, Marcus, I said calmly. She doesn't mean anything, and after tomorrow, neither will you. I left them there in the bedroom, arguing with each other in increasingly desperate voices, and drove to my family's estate in Malibu for the first time in over 4 months. The oceanfront property stretched across 15 acres of prime California coastline, with manicured gardens, a private beach, and a main house that Marcus had driven past countless times on Pacific Coast Highway during our weekend trips. He'd always made jokes about the entitled rich jerks who owned places like that, never knowing he was looking at his girlfriend's childhood home. Mom was on the main terrace when I arrived, reviewing detailed plans with the event coordinator for her upcoming charity gala, an annual fundraiser that typically raised over $2 million for environmental causes. Sweetheart, she exclaimed, immediately setting down her planning notes when she saw my face. What a wonderful surprise to see you. You look terribly upset, though. What's wrong? I told her everything, from the beginning. How I'd been hiding our family's wealth from Marcus, how I'd thought Rachel was helping me maintain that secret, how I'd walked in on them together, how they'd revealed their true motivations and feelings about my supposed lack of ambition and connections. By the time I finished explaining the whole sordid situation, Dad had joined us on the terrace, along with my older brother David, who happened to be home from Stanford Business School for the weekend. So this Marcus character has been using you for 3 years to try to get closer to our family's law firm, Dad said, his voice taking on that ice-cold tone he used in the most serious business negotiations. And Rachel orchestrated this betrayal specifically to position herself as his ticket to success and wealth. That's exactly right, I confirmed. David shook his head in disgust. What did you say his last name was again? Marcus what? Marcus Chen. His family runs a small accounting practice called Chen & Associates out in Riverside. Dad and David exchanged one of those meaningful looks that usually preceded some kind of business decision. The Chen & Associates firm, David said slowly. They're in serious financial trouble. Word around the legal community is that they're about to lose their biggest client due to some tax fraud allegations, and they might have to close their doors entirely. How interesting, Dad mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. And this young man thinks he's scheduled to interview with our firm next Tuesday? Are you going to cancel the interview? I asked. Dad's smile was grim and decidedly unpleasant. Oh no, sweetheart. I'm going to conduct that interview myself personally. The following Tuesday morning, I positioned myself in the conference room's discreet observation area, a space designed for family members to watch important meetings without being seen. Marcus sat across from my father at the polished mahogany table, where our firm made million-dollar decisions. He'd worn his best and only interview suit, the one I'd helped him pick out at Men's Warehouse, and he'd obviously practiced his handshake and his elevator pitch multiple times. He had absolutely no idea that he was walking into what could only be described as a professional execution. So, Marcus, Dad began in his most pleasant business voice, casually reviewing the resume that Marcus had submitted months ago. Tell me about your family's accounting practice. How's business been lately? Marcus launched into his carefully prepared speech about hard work, dedication, and the values his immigrant parents had instilled in him. Dad listened patiently and attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions about Marcus's educational background, his family's current legal troubles, and his long-term career goals. I noticed on your application that you listed Rachel Williams as a personal reference, Dad said in that same casual tone, though I could detect the subtle steel underneath. How exactly do you know Rachel? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, tugging at his tie. She's a close friend of mine, a very close friend. I see. That's interesting. And what about my daughter Emma? I believe you two have been in a relationship for quite some time. All the color drained from Marcus's face so quickly that I thought he might actually faint right there in the conference room. Your daughter, sir? Yes, my daughter Emma. I believe you two were engaged to be married until very recently. Is that correct? Marcus looked like he was having trouble breathing properly. Sir, I can explain this situation. Please do. I'm very interested to hear your explanation. Marcus stammered through the most pathetic explanation I'd ever heard, making himself sound even worse with every word. He tried to claim that our relationship had been complicated, that he and I had grown apart naturally over time, that Rachel had simply been helping him through a difficult emotional transition period. Dad listened to every word without interrupting, his expression remaining completely neutral and unreadable. The same poker face that had made him millions in business negotiations. Tell me something, Marcus, Dad said when Marcus finally finished his rambling explanation. What do you think the concept of integrity means in the legal profession? Integrity it's absolutely everything, sir. Trust, honesty, keeping your word to clients, maintaining confidentiality, always acting in their best interests. And yet you've been systematically violating my daughter's trust for months while simultaneously trying to use her sister to advance your own career ambitions. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. There was literally nothing he could say that would make any of this look better. I'm curious about something else, Dad continued in that same pleasant conversational tone. What was your impression of my daughter's lifestyle? Her work situation, her living arrangements, her apparent financial circumstances? Marcus was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. I thought Emma was hardworking and genuinely independent. She seemed to have very modest means, but that didn't matter to me at all. I loved her for exactly who she was as a person. Dad leaned forward slightly. Loved her enough to betray her with her own sister, apparently. Marcus's hands were visibly shaking now. Mr. Williams? Please? I know the situation looks terrible, but I'm a genuinely good lawyer. I graduated in the top 10% of my class. I can bring real value to your firm. I'm sure you could bring value somewhere, Dad said evenly. Unfortunately, our firm has an absolutely strict policy about hiring people who demonstrate such catastrophically poor judgment when it comes to personal relationships with our family members. Marcus's carefully constructed composure finally cracked completely. Please, Mr. Williams, you have to understand. My family's accounting practice is in serious trouble. We're about to lose everything. I desperately need this job. My parents, my younger sister, they're all depending on me to save our family's business. For just a moment, Dad's expression softened slightly, and I could see a flicker of genuine sympathy cross his face. Then he spoke again, his voice remaining professional, but carrying an unmistakable note of finality. That's truly unfortunate, Marcus, but perhaps you should have considered those potential consequences before you decided to betray my daughter's trust so completely. Dad stood up from the conference table, clearly signaling that the interview was over. Thank you for your time today. We'll certainly be in touch if anything changes. I watched Marcus gather his papers and resume with hands that were shaking so badly he could barely hold them steady. He walked out of the building where he'd hoped to begin his dream legal career, probably knowing that his chance was completely gone forever. But I wasn't finished with him yet. Not by a long shot. That evening, Marcus called me 17 times in a row. I ignored every single call, letting each one go to voicemail. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he sent a desperate text message. "Please, Emma, I know I messed up everything. I know I hurt you. Can we please just talk? I can explain everything." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a neutral cafe in Santa Monica, far from both of our usual hangout spots. He was already there when I arrived, looking absolutely exhausted and desperate. He'd obviously been crying, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I didn't get the job?" he said the moment I sat down across from him. "I know you didn't. Your father told me who you really are, who your family really is." Marcus ran both hands through his hair in frustration. "How does that make you feel, knowing that I found out this way?" Marcus was staring at me with this mixture of confusion, anger, and what looked like genuine bewilderment. "I feel confused, angry at myself, and incredibly stupid. How could you lie to me about something this important for 3 entire years of our relationship? The same way you could lie to me and cheat on me with my own sister for 2 months, I suppose." He visibly flinched at my words. "That's completely different, Emma." "Is it really?" We were both hiding something extremely important from each other. The difference is that my secret was about protecting our relationship from outside influences, while your secret was actively destroying our relationship from the inside. Marcus leaned forward across the small cafe table, his eyes desperate and pleading. "But don't you see how this changes absolutely everything between us? We could have had the most incredible future together. You could have helped me build something truly amazing with my career." "With Rachel, you mean?" "Forget Rachel completely. She doesn't matter at all. She never mattered. You're the only one I want to be with, Emma. You're the only one I've ever really loved." I stared at him, genuinely amazed by the sheer audacity of what he was saying. "Now that you know about my family's law firm and our wealth?" "It's not about the money, Emma. It was never about money." "Wasn't it? Just 6 hours ago, you were telling Rachel how you desperately needed someone who understood your career ambitions, someone with the right connections to help you succeed." Marcus's face turned bright red with embarrassment. "You heard that conversation?" "I heard every single word of that conversation, Marcus, including the part where you said that I didn't understand what it really took to succeed in the legal profession." He opened his mouth to protest or make excuses, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Let me tell you about the kind of success that you'll never, ever get to experience now." I pulled out my phone and showed him photographs that I'd never shared with him during our 3 years together. "This is our private box at the Hollywood Bowl. We've had season tickets there since 1995. Yo-Yo Ma performed at my college graduation party as a personal favor to my parents." Marcus's eyes widened as he stared at the photo. He was absolutely obsessed with classical music. His apartment was filled with posters of famous conductors and composers, and he'd always talked about his dream of attending prestigious musical events. "This is our winter house in Aspen, where we spend the holidays every year. And this is our private vineyard in Napa Valley, where Mom hosts the annual legal scholarship dinner for promising law students." I swiped to the next photo. "This is me with Supreme Court Justice Roberts at last year's Constitutional Law Symposium. Dad sits on the organizing committee and helps choose the speakers every year." Marcus's face grew paler and paler with each photograph I showed him. "And this," I said, showing him a picture of me in an elegant evening gown, "is from last year's California Bar Association annual gala. I'm on the Young Lawyers Advisory Board. That's the governor of California in the background, and that's Senator Feinstein to my right." "Please stop," Marcus whispered, but I was far from finished. "Remember how you always talked about your dream of someday arguing a case before the Supreme Court? This is our family at the court last year when Dad argued the Morrison environmental case. We have permanent reserved seats in the gallery whenever we want them." Marcus put his head in his hands. "Please, Emma, I'm begging you to stop. You said you wanted someone with real connections, Marcus. Rachel has connections. Her college roommate works at a small personal injury firm in Phoenix, Arizona. Very impressive networking." I leaned back in my chair, watching him process the full scope of everything he'd just thrown away forever. "The thing is," I continued, "I would have shared every single bit of this with you eventually, once I was completely certain that you loved me for who I am as a person, not for what I could potentially give your career." Marcus looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen from crying. When were you planning to tell me?" "I was planning to tell you everything right after your bar results came in. I had it all carefully planned out. We were going to celebrate at Spago. Dad knows Wolfgang Puck personally, and I was going to tell you the complete truth about our family." Marcus's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. "I had even already arranged a position for you at the firm. Not just an interview for some entry-level position, but a real job with real responsibility. You would have started as David's direct associate, learning from him, and eventually becoming a junior partner." Marcus was now hyperventilating. A job at Williams & Associates. Starting salary would have been $250,000 annually, plus performance bonuses, plus profit sharing, plus all the professional connections that come with being part of our family business. But instead, you chose Rachel and her college roommate's Phoenix connections. Marcus suddenly grabbed both of my hands across the cafe table, gripping them desperately. I can fix this, Emma. I can make everything right between us. Rachel means absolutely nothing to me. I'll never speak to her again for the rest of my life. I gently but firmly pulled my hands away from his grip. Marcus, it's completely over between us. No, it doesn't have to be over. We can work through this together. I made one terrible mistake, but I love you more than anything. You love what I can potentially give you now that you know the truth. That's not true at all. I loved you long before I knew anything about your family's wealth. Did you really? Or did you love having someone in your life who made you feel successful and superior? Someone you could feel like you were taken care of? Marcus's face crumpled with the realization of what I was saying. Don't say that. Please don't say that. It's true, though, isn't it? You liked that I tutored children for extra money while you were studying for the bar exam. You liked that I shopped at discount stores and used coupons while you criticized other women for being materialistic and high maintenance. You liked feeling like the ambitious, successful one in our relationship. Marcus was openly crying now, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for everything. Please give me just one more chance to prove myself. I stood up to leave the cafe. There's one more thing you should probably know about Rachel. Marcus looked up at me hopefully, probably thinking I was about to give him some information he could use to salvage something from this disaster. She only slept with you because she thought it would somehow get her closer to my family's money and social connections. She's been using you just as much as you've been using me. Marcus's face went completely white. What do you mean by that? Ask her about the massive credit card debt she's been hiding from everyone in our family. Ask her why she suddenly became so interested in you romantically, right after I mentioned that I was thinking about introducing you to my parents. I left Marcus sitting there at that cafe table, finally beginning to understand the true depth and scope of the betrayal and manipulation that had destroyed his life. But I still wasn't finished with either of them. The next day, I called Rachel and told her we needed to have a serious conversation. She agreed to meet me at her apartment in Venice Beach, the same apartment that I'd helped her get the deposit for when she was struggling financially 2 years ago. When I arrived, she was pacing around her small living room nervously, clearly anticipating some kind of confrontation. Look, Emma, she said before I could even sit down, about Marcus and everything that happened. I'm not here to talk about Marcus, I interrupted her. Rachel stopped pacing and stared at me. Then why are you here? I'm here to talk about your debt situation. All the color drained from her face instantly. What debt situation? The $80,000 in credit card debt that you've been hiding from everyone in our family. The debt that's about to force you to file for bankruptcy within the next few months. Rachel collapsed onto her couch like her legs had given out. How did you possibly find out about that? Our families talk to each other, Rachel. Dad sits on the board of directors at Pacific Coast Bank. When someone with our family name starts missing payments and accumulating serious debt, it gets noticed and reported. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. So you know everything. I know that you're drowning financially and have been for over a year. I know that your part-time job at the art gallery barely covers your rent and basic expenses. And I know that you targeted Marcus specifically because you thought I was planning to bring him into our family's business eventually. Rachel buried her face in her hands, finally showing some genuine shame. You thought that if you could somehow steal him away from me and then manipulate your way into a marriage with him, you could gain access to our family's wealth and social connections. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, Rachel whispered. I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. I was just so desperate and scared about my financial situation. But you did hurt me, Rachel. You hurt me deeply and deliberately. And for what? Marcus isn't going to save you from bankruptcy. He can't even save himself or his own family. I pulled out my phone and showed her a detailed financial document. This is Marcus's family's complete financial report from last month. See those tax fraud allegations against their accounting firm? They're completely real and very serious. His family's practice is going to be shut down permanently within the next 60 days. Rachel scanned the document desperately, her hands shaking. But here's the really interesting part of this whole situation, I continued. If you had simply asked me directly for help with your debt problems, I would have given you the money immediately. No questions asked, no strings attached. Because you're my sister and I love you. Rachel looked up at me with confusion and disbelief. What do you mean? I mean that I've been quietly setting aside money in a separate account for years, specifically in case you or anyone else in our family ever needed financial help. There's currently $100,000 sitting in an account with your name on it. I've been waiting patiently for you to swallow your pride and ask for help." Rachel's face went completely white. "Are you being serious right now?" "Dead serious. I've known about your debt problems for over 8 months, and I've been waiting for you to trust me enough to come to me for help." I swiped to the next screen on my phone. "Here's the account information right here. It's been sitting there earning interest for almost a year, just waiting for you to need it." Rachel was hyperventilating now. "You would have just given it to me? No conditions? You could have been completely debt-free by Christmas last year. Instead, you chose to destroy our relationship and betray my trust by stealing my fiancé, all for absolutely nothing." Rachel grabbed my arm desperately. "You could still help me now. You're my sister. Family is supposed to help family no matter what." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I could help you, but I won't." "Please, Emma, I'll lose everything without that money. My apartment, my car, my job, everything I've worked for." "Then maybe you should have thought about those consequences before you betrayed the one person in this world who was already planning to help you solve your problems." I stood up to leave, but Rachel blocked my path to the door. "I'm sorry," she said desperately, tears streaming down her face. "I'm truly, genuinely sorry for everything I did. I know I hurt you terribly, but please don't let my stupid mistakes ruin my entire life." "Your mistakes aren't ruining your life, Rachel. Your choices are ruining your life and your pride. If you had just been honest with me from the very beginning, absolutely none of this would have happened. I'll do anything to make this right between us. I'll tell Marcus the complete truth about everything. I'll publicly apologize to you and the family." "You'll leave me alone," I said firmly, "and you'll figure out your own problems from now on." As I reached the door, Rachel called out one final desperate plea. "What about family loyalty? What about forgiveness?" I turned back to face her one last time. "I learned something very important from Dad's business success over the years, Rachel. Sometimes the smartest investment strategy is knowing exactly when to cut your losses and walk away." Over the next several weeks, I watched both Marcus and Rachel's carefully constructed worlds completely collapse around them. Marcus's family's accounting practice lost their biggest client due to the tax fraud investigation and had to permanently close their doors after 30 years in business. His parents called me somehow, having gotten my personal phone number, desperately begging me to ask Dad to reconsider hiring Marcus. "He's a good boy with a good heart," his mother pleaded over the phone, her voice broken with desperation. "He just made one terrible mistake. Please, our entire family's future is depending on him finding a good job." I gently but firmly explained that the hiring decision was completely final and couldn't be reversed, which wasn't entirely true. Dad had actually approached me privately and asked if I wanted him to reconsider giving Marcus a chance, and I had told him absolutely not. Rachel's situation became even more desperate than Marcus's. With her debt continuing to mount and no realistic way to pay even the minimum monthly payments, she was forced to move out of her Venice apartment and back in with our parents. She took a job as a legal secretary at a small personal injury firm, making barely enough money to cover her basic expenses while her credit score continued to plummet. She called me one final time, about 6 weeks after our confrontation at her apartment. "I'm filing for bankruptcy next week." She announced without any preamble, "I'm sorry to hear that, Rachel. The account you mentioned, the one with my name on it, is it still there? It is. And you won't." "No, Rachel, I won't." She hung up the phone without saying another word. 2 months later, I received a long, rambling message from Marcus through LinkedIn. He was working as a document reviewer for a temporary legal services company, making $20 an hour with no benefits and no job security. The message was filled with apologies and promises about how much he'd changed as a person, how he'd learned from his mistakes, how he understood now what he'd lost. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I spent that weekend at our family's house in Aspen, finally ready to stop hiding who I really was from the world. "I want to start being completely open about our family's wealth," I told my parents over dinner on the terrace overlooking the mountains. "I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not just to protect myself from users and gold diggers." Dad nodded approvingly. "I think that's a very wise decision, sweetheart. The right person will love you regardless of how much money you have, and the wrong person will reveal their true nature very quickly." Mom agreed enthusiastically. "Authenticity is always the best policy in relationships, dear. You should never have to hide fundamental parts of yourself." David looked up from his phone with a smirk. Speaking of wrong people, Marcus Chen has been posting on Instagram almost daily about learning from his mistakes and becoming a better man. It's actually kind of pathetic to watch. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Please block him on all social media. Already did, but his posts are getting increasingly desperate. He's been writing these incredibly long captions about personal growth and second chances and finding his way back to the people who matter. Let me guess, I said. He's suddenly become very interested in charity work and volunteering and self-improvement. Exactly. How did you know? Because he thinks he can somehow reinvent himself and win me back if he just becomes the right kind of person. Dad chuckled. Some people never learn from their mistakes, no matter how obvious the lesson should be. 6 months later, I decided I was ready to start dating again. This time, I was completely upfront and honest about my family's wealth and social position from the very first conversation. I figured that if someone was going to try to use me for money and connections, I'd rather find out immediately rather than waste months or years of my life. The difference in dating was absolutely remarkable. Men either got intimidated by my family's wealth and disappeared after the first date, or they stayed around and proved through their actions that they were genuinely interested in me as a person. There was no middle ground, no room for confusion or hidden agendas or long-term deception. I met Jonathan at a legal conference that my family's foundation was sponsoring in downtown Los Angeles. He was there representing a non-profit legal aid organization that provided free services to low-income families, and he had absolutely no idea who I was when he struck up a conversation with me about environmental law during the coffee break. That was a brilliant presentation on renewable energy regulations, he said, genuinely enthusiastic about the topic. Are you working in environmental law yourself? My family is in the renewable energy business, I replied. I help out with legal and policy issues sometimes. That's incredibly cool. It's such an important field right now. We desperately need more lawyers who really understand the intersection between business interests and environmental protection. We ended up talking for over 2 hours. He never once asked what my family's company was specifically, or how I was connected to the conference sponsors, or what my role was in the renewable energy industry. He was simply interested in getting to know me as a person and discussing our shared interests in environmental policy. When he finally asked for my phone number, I decided to tell him the truth right away. Before you decide whether you want to see me again, there's something important you should know about me. Jonathan looked slightly concerned. Okay, what is it? My family has serious money, like extremely serious money, and I'm telling you this up front because I've learned that it's much better to be completely honest from the beginning than to let people discover the truth later and feel deceived. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, obviously processing what I just told him. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Of course. When you say extremely serious money, are we talking about successful business owners, or are we talking about... We're talking about private jets and multiple homes and charity galas. He nodded slowly. And you're telling me this because I want to know whether you're interested in me as a person, or whether you're interested in what my trust fund could potentially do for you. Jonathan actually laughed out loud. Well, I was definitely interested in you before I knew anything about your trust fund. Does that count for something? It's definitely a good start. We've been together for 10 months now, and it's been the most honest, genuine relationship of my entire life. Jonathan has met my entire family, spent time at all of our homes, and even joined us for a 2-week vacation in Tuscany. Through all of it, he's remained exactly the same person I met at that conference. Passionate about his work, principled in his beliefs, and completely unimpressed by material wealth or social status. The real test of his character came when Marcus somehow found out about Jonathan through mutual legal connections and tried to warn him about me and my family. Jonathan told me about the encounter immediately, which showed me exactly the kind of person he is. Some guy named Marcus approached me at the courthouse downtown, he said over dinner. He claimed he used to be engaged to you and wanted to warn me about what I was getting myself into. My heart sank. What did he say to you? He said that your family would try to control me and my career, that you had hidden your wealth from him and couldn't be trusted, that I should ask you about how you treated him and your sister when your relationship ended. And what did you tell him? Jonathan grinned. I told him that if a woman was smart enough and strong enough to protect herself from gold diggers and users, she was definitely smart enough for me. You actually said that? I also told him that if he was spending his time going around warning your new boyfriends instead of reflecting on why you felt the need to hide your wealth from him in the first place, he was probably the exact reason you have trust issues with money. I kissed him right there in the middle of the restaurant. Marcus never bothered either of us again after that conversation. Last month, I heard through family friends that Rachel had finally managed to move out of our parents' house and was working as a paralegal in Portland, Oregon. She had managed to avoid complete bankruptcy by taking a second full-time job and selling everything valuable she owned, but she was still struggling to pay off the remaining debt and rebuild her credit score. Marcus, meanwhile, had been forced to move back in with his parents after his family's accounting practice closed permanently. He was working multiple contract legal jobs and trying desperately to rebuild his professional reputation in the legal community. But word travels incredibly fast in legal circles. His betrayal of our family had become well known, and most reputable firms wouldn't consider hiring him. I didn't take any pleasure or satisfaction in their struggles and failures. Their current situations were simply the natural consequences of the choices they had made, not anything I had orchestrated or planned as revenge. But I did appreciate the bitter irony of how everything had turned out. Marcus had desperately wanted someone who could help him build a successful legal career, someone with the right connections and understanding of professional ambition. He thought that person was Rachel, with her supposed family connections and her understanding of what success looked like. Instead, he had given up his relationship with someone who actually could have given him everything he had ever dreamed of professionally. Rachel had desperately wanted to solve her financial problems through strategic family connections and relationships. She thought that stealing Marcus away from me would somehow lead to marriage and access to our family's wealth and social status. Instead, she had destroyed the one relationship in her life that could have actually helped her solve her problems immediately. They had both reached for fool's gold and lost the real treasure they already had within their grasp. The last time I saw Marcus was at a legal aid fundraiser 3 months ago. I was there with Jonathan, representing my family's foundation and presenting a $500,000 donation to the organization. Marcus was working the event as contract help, serving drinks and appetizers to the same attorneys he had once hoped to work alongside as colleagues. He recognized me immediately, but pretended not to notice me. I played along with the charade, treating him exactly like any other server at the event. "Champagne?" he asked as he approached our table, his voice carefully neutral and professional. "Thank you," I said politely, accepting a glass from his tray. As he walked away to serve other tables, I heard him ask his supervisor if he could take a break for a few minutes. I didn't feel vindicated or satisfied watching him serve drinks at an event where he could have been a guest. I just felt genuinely sad for him. Marcus had always been ambitious and hardworking, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to succeed professionally. But he had been so focused on climbing the social and professional ladder that he had completely forgotten to notice who was already standing there beside him, ready to help pull him up. Now he was serving champagne to the very people he could have been working with and socializing with, if only he had been honest and faithful and patient. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I had told him the truth about my family's wealth much earlier in our relationship. Would he have stayed faithful to me? Would our relationship have survived and thrived? I'll never know for certain, but I honestly suspect that it wouldn't have made any difference. The Marcus who fell in love with my modest lifestyle and felt superior to me was fundamentally the same Marcus who cheated on me with my sister. The knowledge about my family's money would have just changed the surface details and his tactics, not his underlying character and values. Jonathan knows this entire story, every detail from beginning to end. He knows exactly why I was so cautious about revealing my family's wealth, and he completely understands why trust and authenticity are so critically important to me in relationships. You absolutely dodged a bullet with that guy. He told me after I had explained the whole situation to him one evening. Marcus showed you exactly who he really was when he thought you had nothing substantial to offer him beyond yourself. That's incredibly valuable information about someone's character. He's absolutely right. In my attempts to protect myself from opportunists and gold diggers, I had accidentally created the perfect test of someone's fundamental character and values. Marcus had failed that test completely and spectacularly. These days, I'm much more selective and careful about who I choose to trust with personal information, but I'm also significantly more confident in my ability to recognize genuinely good people. I serve openly on multiple nonprofit boards, attend charity events where my family's wealth is obvious and well known, and work directly with my family's foundation, where everyone knows exactly who I am and what resources I have access to. I also continue tutoring children, but now it's purely by personal choice, rather than any kind of necessity or character-building exercise. The work keeps me connected to people and families outside my privileged social bubble. And it constantly reminds me why I value authenticity and genuine human connection over social status and material possessions. That balance between wealth and humility feels authentic and right in a way that completely hiding my identity never did. Jonathan proposed to me last week during a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant in Santa Monica. The engagement ring isn't the largest or most expensive one I could have received, but it's absolutely perfect because he chose it himself, knowing that I would love the thought and meaning behind it far more than any price tag or status symbol. We're currently planning a wedding for next fall. It will necessarily be quite large because my family has extensive business associates, political connections, and longtime friends who will need to be invited, but it will also be deeply personal and meaningful to both of us. Marcus and Rachel obviously won't be invited to the wedding, but I genuinely hope that they have both learned something valuable from their experiences over the past year. I hope Marcus has finally realized that true partnership in a relationship means supporting each other through challenges and difficulties, not just staying together until something apparently better comes along. I hope Rachel has learned that shortcuts and manipulation and deception never lead to genuine security or lasting happiness. Most importantly, though, I hope they have both learned that betraying people who genuinely care about you isn't just morally wrong. It's also incredibly stupid from a practical standpoint, because you never really know who you might be betraying or what opportunities you might be permanently destroying. In Marcus's case, he betrayed and lost someone who could have given him everything he had ever dreamed of professionally. In Rachel's case, she betrayed and lost someone who was already planning to solve all of her financial problems without any conditions or expectations. They both gambled everything on deception and manipulation, and they lost absolutely everything that mattered. I gambled on honesty and vulnerability, and I found genuine love. Sometimes the biggest risk in life is being completely vulnerable and authentic with people, but I've learned that it's also the only reliable way to find out who is actually worth keeping in your life long term. Marcus learned that lesson far too late to do him any good. By the time he finally realized what he had lost and thrown away, I was already building a completely new life with someone who loved me for exactly who I am as a person. Trust fund and all. The most satisfying part of this entire experience isn't that Marcus and Rachel got what they deserved, although they certainly did. The most satisfying part is that I learned I'm strong enough and valuable enough to walk away from people who don't appreciate what I bring to their lives. Marcus thought he was trading up when he chose Rachel and her supposed connections over me. Instead, he traded away the only real chance he'll ever have at the successful life he always claimed to want. That's exactly what happens when you mistake fool's gold for the real thing, when you can't recognize genuine treasure, even when it's sitting right in front of you. Sometimes the most valuable and precious things in life come in very humble, modest packaging. And sometimes the biggest mistake you can possibly make is failing to recognize that treasure when it's right there within your grasp. Marcus learned that lesson too late to save himself or his family. But I learned something equally important. I am worth much more than settling for someone who sees me as a stepping stone to success, rather than as a destination worth staying with. And that's a lesson that will serve me well for the rest of my life. 3 months after Jonathan's proposal, we decided to have an engagement party at my family's Malibu estate. It was a beautiful evening with about 200 guests, including Supreme Court justices, senators, prominent business leaders, and celebrities who had been family friends for decades. Jonathan's parents flew out from Chicago, and I watched with amusement as they tried to process the scale of wealth they were witnessing. But Jonathan himself remained completely unchanged, introducing me to his colleagues and friends exactly the same way he always had. During the party, David pulled me aside with an interesting piece of news. "Guess who applied for a job at our firm again?" he said with a smirk. "Please don't tell me it's Marcus." "It's Marcus. 3rd time this year. Dad had me personally write the rejection letter." I shook my head. Some people really never learn. The letter was basically one sentence. "We do not hire attorneys who have demonstrated poor judgment regarding family matters. That seems fair." "Oh, and Rachel called Mom last week asking if she could come to your engagement party. Please tell me Mom said no. Mom told her that trust, once broken, can't simply be repaired by asking nicely." Then she hung up. I felt a brief moment of sadness for both of them. They were stuck in patterns of their own making, unable to move forward because they couldn't accept responsibility for their choices. But that sadness passed quickly when Jonathan appeared at my side with champagne and that smile that had first caught my attention at the legal conference. "Ready for our future?" he asked. "I've never been more ready for anything," I replied. As we stood there overlooking the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness, I realized that Marcus and Rachel had actually done me an enormous favor. Their betrayal had forced me to stop hiding who I really was and to find someone who could love all of me, including the parts I had been afraid to show. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed to find something infinitely better. Marcus had wanted someone who could help him build the life he thought he deserved. He ended up with someone who nearly destroyed the life he actually had. I had wanted someone who could love me for who I really was. I ended up with exactly that. In the end, we all got precisely what we were truly looking for. We just didn't all realize what that was at the time. The difference was that I was looking for love, while Marcus was looking for advantage. Love has a way of finding you when you're authentic. Advantage has a way of disappearing when you're not. That's a lesson worth remembering and one I'll never forget. As I write this, Jonathan and I have been happily married for 6 months. We split our time between Los Angeles and San Francisco, where Jonathan has taken a position with a prestigious environmental law firm, a job he earned entirely on his own merits, with no help from my family's connections. Marcus is still working contract jobs and living with his parents. Rachel moved back to Los Angeles and is working as a legal secretary, still paying off her debt. They both reach out occasionally, Marcus through social media, Rachel through family members, always with some version of the same message about second chances and learning from mistakes. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And some lessons, once learned, change everything. I learned that authenticity is worth more than protection. Jonathan learned that genuine character matters more than wealth. Marcus learned that betrayal has consequences. Rachel learned that shortcuts lead to dead ends. We all got the education we needed, even if we didn't all get the outcomes we wanted. And that, I think, is exactly how these things are supposed to work. The end.